All right. So yeah. So in the last class, we were looking at this coupling for counting independent sets of size k, right? And what we said was that we defined this coupling, and we said what is the chance that so you take you start with two independent sets xt and yt, and as these two chains, now you have two copies. The coupling says that there are these two copies that are progressing, and you want to know when is it that the intersection will be uh, equal to both the sets, right? Or when is it that the difference contracts. So the first part, we tried to bound this probability that dt plus 1, which is the difference. So this quantity here, just to recall, this was xt plus 1 minus yt plus 1, right? When is it that it is less than xt minus yt, right? When does it become less, when does it reduce? And to say that, what we can actually show is that, so you have to choose two vertices. For that, what you want to say is that v must be chosen from out here, and so you're going to remove v and you're going to add w, right? So you want to make sure that the w gets added to both the sets. Only then it will fall into the intersection, right? So the w that you pick should be such that it will fall into this intersection that is sitting in here, right? Which means that w must be, if you look at all the neighbors of these vertices here, right, w must be outside that set, right? And how many neighbors are there sitting in here? So you know that, so it is basically, um, um, you want to find all the neighbors of xt union yt, right? And you want to choose from something outside this xt union yt minus uh, v and pi v, right? From somewhere outside of this, if you pick, then that w will definitely, it will be possible to add that w into the independent set. Okay, so with this idea, what you can actually show is that this quantity is just dt over k. So this is like choosing from xt minus yt, right? And so now here what you want to say is that you don't want to consider uh, xt union yt and the neighbors of xt union yt minus these two vertices v and prime pi v, right? You choose from outside that, and that the probability that dt plus 1 is less than dt is equal to dt minus 1 is at least this probability, correct? Any questions regarding this? Any clarifications required? Okay, so then what you can do is, now we just try to estimate the expected size of dt plus 1 given dt. Okay, so what is the expected value of dt plus 1 given that in the previous set you had dt differences, right? Notice that you know that dt plus 1 minus dt is at most 1, right? It can take either values 1, 0, or minus 1. And if you use that fact, what you will get is that expectation of dt plus 1 given dt is just this dt plus the probability that dt plus 1 is equal to dt plus 1 minus the probability that dt plus 1 is equal to dt minus 1, right? You just use the fact that dt plus 1 can be either dt plus 1, dt minus 1, or dt itself, right? That will give you this equality. Okay, so this conditional expectation you can bound, right? Because you substitute in the values for the probability that dt plus 1 is equal to dt plus 1 and dt plus 1 is equal to dt minus 1. Okay, now you substitute these values, and these are what we calculated from earlier, right? These two quantities are exactly what was calculated earlier, right? And you plug these values in, and you simplify it sufficiently. What you will get is that it is at most dt times 1 minus something. Okay, So the expected value of dt plus 1 given dt is shrinking by a small factor corresponding to dt, right? So this is some factor alpha less than 1, right? So it is shrinking. The expected value of dt plus 1 is some constant factor less than dt, right? And so the idea is that if you keep doing this, each time this value, the difference is shrinking by a constant factor, so you don't have to do this for too many steps. Before, it would have shrunk completely to 0, right? So that is what we want to show. So in other words, what you can, so this is just to write it down. You can write the expectation of dt plus 1 using the conditional probability, right? This is where you're going to put in that value. So expectation of dt plus 1, you can use the conditional probability to write it as summation over all the dt values greater than 0, probability of at the tth step, the difference being dt, and the expected value of dt plus 1 given dt. Right? It's just writing the expectation using the conditional expectation, just like what we saw earlier. Right? And then you substitute in the values for the expectation of dt plus 1 given dt, and you observe that you can take this outside, and you observe that this quantity is nothing but the expectation of dt, right? So therefore, what you have is that the expectation of dt plus 1 is at most the expectation of dt times this factor, this factor alpha, which is strictly less than 1. Right? It's strictly less than 1 for the choice of k that we have, right? Recall that k was at most n divided by 3 times delta plus 1. So you need the k value suitably so that this is actually reducing, right? And now if you inductively do this, right, if you keep applying this again, so this will be expectation of, at most expectation of dt minus 1 times 1 minus this alpha square and so on. You keep doing this such that finally what you have is this is at most d0 times this alpha to the t. Okay. Notice that we are always working with independent sets of size k. So the symmetric, the difference xt minus yt can be at most k, right? So therefore, if you keep doing this, what you have is that within after t steps, the expected size of dt plus 1 is given by this term where d0 is at most k, right? This is, you can replace it as actually k, right? Any questions so far? Okay. So that tells you that expectation of dt plus 1 is small. So now you can look at the value of t. You can choose t large enough so that this expectation is actually very small, right? The reason we want to make this small is because we're going to use Markov's inequality, right? We'll just use a simple Markov's inequality to say that the probability that dt plus 1 is greater than or equal to 1 is at most the expected value of dt plus 1. And now you can substitute in the values for expectation of d0, which is k, at most k, and then this value alpha to the t, right? So now you choose t's sufficiently large so that this probability is less than epsilon, right? So you choose t large enough so that this probability that dt plus 1 is greater than or equal to 1 is at most epsilon. What it means is that after t plus 1 steps, it is unlikely that the two independent sets will be different. Right? The probability that after t plus 1 steps, the two independent sets are different is at most epsilon. That is what this will mean. If you substitute t, for instance, if you substitute these values, right? You know that k is n over 3 delta plus 1, and you substitute t to be this value. What it says is that after t plus 1 steps of the Markov chain, x t plus 1 and y t plus 1 are equal with probability at least 1 minus epsilon, right? So therefore it tells you that this coupling will get, the two chains will couple, which means that it will become the same independent set after at most t plus t steps where t is this value. Okay. Notice that this is polynomial in both n and k, and k is again polynomial in n, so this is polynomial in n and 1 over epsilon, right? So this chain is rapidly mixing. Therefore, in polynomial number of steps, you will actually converge to the stationary distribution, which is the uniform distribution over all independent sets of size k. Right? This is just completing the analysis from yesterday. Any questions regarding this? Okay. All right. So now what we'll do is we'll look at a slightly more um, advanced coupling technique, what is known as path coupling. It's again one way to do prove mixing time bounds. It's one type of coupling, and this we will actually use to complete the algorithm we'll use to design the FPRAS for counting independent sets. So there is no bound on the size of the independent sets. The independent set can be any size. You want to count the set of all independent sets in a graph. Just that the analysis will require that the degree of the graph, the maximum degree of the graph, is at most 4. Okay. So we'll come up with a Markov chain, which we will use to sample uniformly independent sets, arbitrary independent sets in graphs of size. So the Markov chain will sample independent sets. It doesn't matter whether the degree is 4 or not. It is only when we analyze the coupling argument, when we try to prove the mixing time, that we will actually require the degree bound. Okay. All the parts regarding the Markov chain, the stationary distribution being uniform, and everything will apply to any graph. Just that the analysis to complete analysis to bound the mixing time will require the bounded degree, the property of being bounded degree. Okay. So this is again another coupling argument, slightly more complicated, right? And it's a sort of a generic technique also, right? It can be applied in a very many different settings, but here we are looking at in a very specific setting. Okay? So what is the idea of path coupling? So what you do is you start by defining a coupling between two states such that their difference is 1, the set difference. So here dt by dt, what I'll refer to is the symmetric difference. Right? So that is xt minus yt plus yt minus xt. Okay. So you define a coupling between states that are very close to each other. They differ in only 1. It could be, so depending on the problem, it might be slightly different. But here in our case, it's going to be it's going to differ just by one vertex. Right? So xt and yt are 2 independent sets, except, and they're equal except for one vertex. Can we define a coupling between these two such states? Okay. Now, what we show is what happens when you what happens to this value dt as the Markov chain progresses, right? So just like in the previous proof, we try to bound the expected value of dt plus 1, but now you're going to use the fact that dt is equal to 1, because you know that the coupling is on states which are differing in only one vertex. So let's try to bound the expected value of dt plus 1 when dt is equal to 1. Okay. So we start with this. We look at this very simple scenario where the two sets are very close to each other. Okay. And then what you do is you try to extend this to arbitrary sets. Okay. So notice that the idea is that if you have two sets xt and yt that differ in many vertices, what you can do is you can construct a chain of states that go from xt to yt such that so it goes, say, z0, z1, z2 up till say zk, such that xt and z0 will differ in one state, z0 and z1 will differ in one state, z1 and z2 will differ in one state, and so on. Okay. So you know how to define coupling between these pairs of states which are very close to each other. You use that to define a coupling between this path. The endpoints of this path are xt and yt, and that will define a coupling between these two arbitrary states. Okay. And given this, what we will do is you will extend this value, right? You extend the bound for the expected value of dt plus 1, given that dt is equal to 1, to bound expected value of dt plus 1 given dt for an arbitrary value of dt. Right? So if you have an arbitrary set xt yt, its symmetric difference could be very large, right? For instance, xt could be the empty set and yt could be a very large independent set, right? It could even be theta n, right? So we use this chain, and within each chain we know how to bound the changes, and we use that to bound the change for the entire path, right? This path of states from xt to yt. Okay? No, the only thing is that it is only used in the analysis. In the actual algorithm, you're not going to, these states don't exist, right? I mean, you are not going to do any of this. These states are there only to define this coupling and use it in the analysis. Okay? The name comes from there, the path coupling. Okay. So this is what we are going to use. So this is the idea for, this is what we're going to formalize and prove. Uh, this is what we're going to formalize and use to prove that you can sample from independent sets in a graph of maximum degree at most 4. Okay. So this might be a little vague right now. Okay, we'll go into it and try to define the terms and the concepts involved, and then it'll probably make sense. Okay. Any questions right now? Okay. So let's start with the Markov chain. Let's start with the Markov chain for independent sets. Okay. So this Markov chain is going to be different from the Markov chain we saw when we first studied independent sets. So there we had a very simple Markov chain where you take a vertex and you check whether it can be added or deleted, right? You either take out a vertex or you add a vertex and so on. We had a very simple Markov chain. So that Markov chain, apparently it's not clear how to show that that Markov chain has good mixing properties. It's not clear whether it has a good mixing property, and we don't know how to prove it also. So what we look at is a different Markov chain, and we'll prove this mixing time, bound on the mixing time for this Markov chain. Okay. So let's see what this Markov chain is. Okay, so let's start with an independent set at, let's say at step t, the state xt corresponds to this independent set I. Okay. Now the Markov chain proceeds as follows. It is going to choose an edge uniformly at random. Okay, choose one edge uniformly at random, and then it's going to do one of 3 things with equal probability on that edge. Okay. So first you sample the edge uniformly at random. Then once you get that edge, you will toss a coin. There are 3 possibilities. With probability 1/3, you will do one of these 3 things. Okay, so what are the 3 things? Well, the first thing that you will do is you will xt plus 1, you will remove the vertices u and v from the independent set I. Okay. If the independent set does not contain u and v, then xt plus 1 is same as xt. You just try to remove it. If it is already not there, then xt plus 1 is same as xt. But you just remove it. Right? And removing vertices will not destroy the independent set property. So xt plus 1 is again an independent set. Okay. Now, the second step or the second option is that you check whether it is possible to remove u and add v and still get an independent set. Okay. You look at the set I prime, which is I minus u union v, right? Is it possible to remove u and add v? If that is an independent set, then you transition to that independent set. Otherwise, you keep xt plus 1 as xt itself. Okay. The third option, the third possibility that you might do is you see whether you can remove v and add u, right? So the second and third are symmetrical. You try to see whether you can remove one vertex and add another vertex. If so, you do it and get a new independent set. And you do one of these 3 steps with equal probability. With probability 1/3, you do one of these 3 steps. So this is your new Markov chain. Okay. For instance, it is possible that u is not in the second step. It is possible that u is not in the independent set and v is in the independent set. In which case, I minus u union v is same as I itself. That also can happen. Right. So I minus u just means that it's not that if u is there, remove it. Otherwise, I mean, it's just a set difference. Okay. Is the Markov chain clear? Any questions regarding the Markov chain? Okay. So I leave it as an exercise to show that this Markov chain has all the properties that you want, right? That it is irreducible, aperiodic, the stationary distribution is a uniform distribution. All of that I will leave. Okay. Just that you'll probably need the fact that the graph is connected. I think that will be needed if you want to show it. So we'll assume that the graph that we have is connected. Right? That doesn't make much of a difference, because what you can do is, you can, if you had a graph which was disconnected, you can count independent sets in the graph separately and then multiply them together. Right? So we'll assume that the graph we have is connected for now. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So then let's try to understand this Markov chain and see what how to prove how to use path coupling in this Markov chain. Okay, so let's see what the coupling should be. So notice that the coupling is going to be defined first for two states xt and yt, which differ in exactly one vertex. Okay, we'll first look at this coupling, and for this coupling we will say what is the probability that in the next step, the size, the dt increases. Okay, what is the expected increase in dt, and using that we will finally define a coupling for the entire for arbitrary states xt and yt. Okay, so this is where what we will do first. So how does the states look like, right? So when you have two states xt and yt, then it will look like this. So I is the set xt, and yt is I union a vertex x that is sitting outside. Right? This is what it means to say that the symmetric difference between xt and yt is 1. Right? I is identical between xt and yt, and there is another x which is outside I. Okay, this is the scenario that we are in. Right? And the coupling is going to be very simple. What you do is you do the same step on both xt and yt. Okay? What does it mean? It means that you will choose the edge uv uniformly at random, and then there are three possible steps that you can do. Right? You choose the same step to be done in both xt and yt. Okay, so there are three possible things that you can do with the edge: either remove u and v, or you try to remove u and add v, or you try to remove v and add u. Okay, so you choose a edge uniformly at random. You choose which of the three options you're going to try with probability 1/3. Once you have done that, you try that same step on both xt and yt. Okay, so it's the same move is going to be done on both xt and yt. That is the coupling that we're going to analyze. Is the coupling clear? Is the setting clear? Is it so it's the same thing. It's not even, there's no difference between the two steps that are done. So in one, it is possible that when you try to do this in xt, something can change, in yt nothing may change, and so on. Okay, and that is what we want to analyze finally. Right? If you do the same move on both xt and yt, assuming that the symmetric difference between xt and yt is 1, what happens, right? How do these sets change? That's what we want to find out. Right? In particular, we want to compute this quantity, expected value of dt plus 1 given dt. And in our case, dt is actually going to be 1. Right? Because you're working with xt and yt, which differ in just exactly one vertex. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's try to understand when dt plus 1 and dt are going to be different. Okay. So now I have just drawn, so this I is the set xt and x, I union x is yt, and I've just drawn the different edges that are present in this graph. Right? There could be an edge that is present inside I, which is between two vertices in I. There could be an edge that is present in a vertex in I and a vertex outside I, which is different from x. Right? There could be an edge which is between two vertices that are not in I union x. There could be an edge that is incident on x. Right? These are the different sort of edges that are present in the graph. Right? It covers all the sort of edges that you will have. Right? So the red vertex might also be inside I. Okay, it doesn't matter. So, okay, these are the different types of vertices. And notice that the Markov chain, what it does is you're going to choose an edge, and then you're going to either remove both the endpoints, or you're going to try to remove one of the endpoints and so on, right? That's what you're going to do. So the question is, for which of these edges will dt plus 1 differ from dt? Which, not that it will always differ, but what are the, for instance, what are the edges for which you know that dt plus 1 will not differ from dt? If you use that edge to modify the independent sets. Which are the edges which will not change the value of dt plus 1? Among these different types of edges.
Only red will change, right?
Red might change. Red will change, right? Red will change because it is possible. So how can red change? The way red can change is that you will choose the red edge, and then you will say, let me remove X and add this vertex, which is, say, I'll call it V. Okay. That red edge is, I'll call it V. So it is possible that you will remove X and add V, in which case it will just fall inside, and then dt plus 1 will actually be equal to, it will reduce, right? I mean, the intersection where. So that can change, right? Is there any other edge that can possibly change? What if there is an edge like this? Okay. Suppose you had an edge like this. If this is the case, can this edge cause some problems?
In X you might add real vertex, but in Y you may not be able to add it because X is present.
So yeah, so let's name these vertices, right? Let's call this U and W. Okay, let's call these vertices U and W. So it is possible that so you choose UW, okay, and then you'd say you try to add U. Okay, you try to add U and you don't. You're trying to remove W and you want to add U. Okay, so now in XT you might be able to add U, but in YT you will not be able to add U, right? Because of this edge, right? So because of the edge UX, U cannot be added to YT, but U can be added to, maybe, right? It's not that it will always happen, but it can happen. Can be added to XT. Okay. So an edge UW which is not incident, if none of the vertices are adjacent to X, then nothing will happen. It will not matter. But if one of these vertices U or W is adjacent to X, then it can possibly change the value of dt plus 1. Right? So among all the edges that are present in the graph, we need to worry about edges that are incident on X and edges that are incident on vertices that are neighbors to X. Okay, so these are the two edges which can change the value of dt plus 1. These are the ones that you will need to analyze when we try to bound the expected value of dt plus 1. Okay, is that clear? Any questions? Okay, right, so these things we are going to analyze. So let me call a vertex as a bad vertex. Okay, if it is in the symmetric difference. It is in one but not in the other, right? For instance, X is a bad vertex. Okay, good vertex are ones which are not bad, right? Bad vertex is one which is in one but not in the other. Okay, now how will dt plus 1 differ, right? How can dt plus 1 differ, right? There are two ways in which it can differ. Okay, what are those ways? One is that you take a vertex, yeah, you'd not understand the blue edge case. So blue edge case, what is it that, see, you might delete both the vertices, you might remove both the vertices from the independent set, or you might remove just one of the vertices, right? So in either case, your dt plus 1 remains the same, right? You're doing it for both the xt and yt because I is there is present, I is a subset of yt and I is equal to xt. So the blue edge, whatever you do with it, dt plus 1 will not. No, we are selecting edges at random. We are not selecting pairs of vertices. We are selecting edges at random. Yeah. Does that clarify the... Oh yeah, so there will not be any edge in I. So yeah, you don't even need to consider. I'm sorry. Then yeah, you're correct. Sorry, I just wrote that. You're right. There is no blue edge. I'm sorry. You're correct. Good point. Okay. So yeah. So does that clarify, Hardik? Is that okay? There's no blue edge. That is not. Yeah. So now let's try to see how dt plus 1 is varying from dt. Okay. So for dt plus 1 to increase, right? For dt plus 1 to increase, what you want is that a w that is not equal to x will go from a good to a bad, right? The only bad vertex in this set is x, right? Because take any other vertex, either both that vertex is there in both xt and yt or it's not there in either of them. Okay? So every vertex apart from x is a good vertex, right? So now you want to check for any vertex that is not equal to x, when does it go from being a good vertex to a bad vertex? And when does x go from being a bad vertex to a good vertex? Right? From going from bad to good, it means either it goes into I or it just gets thrown out from yt also. Right? So these are the two things that we need to analyze. Okay. So let's define this quantity, right? Delta w. Right? So delta w is 1 if w goes from good to bad. You're adding something, right? dt plus 1 is a set difference. It's a number of vertices in which the two independent sets are different. So we say delta w is 1 if w goes from being good to bad. You have increased delta plus 1. And delta x is minus 1 if x becomes good from being a bad vertex. So you have reduced dt plus 1. Okay. Right. So what we are interested in is this quantity, right? Which is the expected value of dt plus 1 minus dt given that dt is equal to 1. Right? What is the difference? How will it change? What is the expected value of this difference given that dt is equal to 1? Okay? And this difference is precisely this delta w's. Right? All the vertices which go from good to bad add 1 to the difference. And x, if it goes from bad to good, then it adds a minus 1. Right? So to understand this expected value of this difference, we are actually interested in this expected value of sum of delta w's. And in particular, we are interested in this quantity. Right? Take any w. What is the expected value of delta w given dt is equal to 1? Right? And what we have just seen from our discussion earlier is that we only need to consider the w's that we are interested in are x, neighbors of x, and neighbors of x. Right? These are the only x's we are actually interested in. These are the only ones that can possibly create, that can possibly change. Right? Or rather, these are the only ones that will actually be involved. These are not the only ones. These are the only ones that will be involved in changing this difference. Right? For the others, you don't. Nothing is going to happen. Even if you change, the difference is not going to change. We'll only need to worry about edges that are incident to x, or edges that are incident to vertices that are adjacent to x. Right? That's what you need to only consider these vertices and analyze them. Okay, and that's what we are going to do. It's going to be a case analysis, and this is where we are actually going to use the fact that the graph is going to has degree at most 4. It will limit the number of cases that we want to analyze, because you know that if you take a neighbor of x, then its degree is at most 4. It can have, so one neighbor is x, it can have at most 3 other neighbors. Okay. Till now we never used the fact that the degree of the graph is at most 4. Now we are going to use the fact that the degree of the graph is at most 4. Okay. And because of that, we'll get a simple case analysis, okay, of the possible values of this expectation. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So then let's try to understand the different cases that will arise, right? So this is the first case that is going to come, right? So you have the vertex X, right? So X is in the independent set. X is in YT. Y is some vertex. You don't really care whether it is in the independent set or not. And then Y can have at most 3 neighbors, right? So it is possible that so the first scenario is a case where so the green represents the fact that these are part of I. Okay? So green means that say Z1. So the first this is Z1 and Z2 is in I, or Z1, Z2, and Z3 all of them are in I. Okay. So in this case, what can you say about dt plus 1 minus dt? Can dt plus 1 change in this scenario? If this is the case, right? You take X, you take one of its neighbors Y, and it is the case is that Y has at least 2 neighbors in I. Okay. Now, will the value of dt plus 1 change? Or will it increase is the question. Let's look at this case first, right? So what happens if you choose xy, the edge xy? What are the different cases that you have to look at? So if you take the edge xy, it can be that, let's look at xy. So two things can happen. You remove x and y. Then you try to remove x, add y. You try to remove x, remove y, and add x. Right? These are the 3 things that you can possibly do. Now, removing xy is will only reduce dt plus 1, right? Dt plus 1 will become less than dt, right? And you cannot remove x and add y. That move will not happen, right? Because if you try to, because you cannot add y, because y is adjacent to a vertex which is in the independent set, right? So second step will not happen. The third step might happen, right? There is y is not present, so you might so the third step is basically you're with the same independent set. Dt plus 1 is not increasing at all, right? It's remaining same. So if you look at the edge xy, the only way it can happen is that it can only possibly reduce the size of the reduce dt plus 1. Okay. What if you consider this edge? That is one possibility. And what about, say, if you take this edge? Can it increase dt plus 1? Let's look at the case yz1. So removing x, y and z1 is not going to change anything, right? If you remove y and z1, what will happen? It is you'll just remove z1 and the difference, symmetric difference. Yeah. For y z1, it cannot increase, right? This nothing will happen, right? The only case would be you try to remove z1 and add y, right? If you try to remove z1 and add y, then again it cannot be added, right? You can remove z1, but you cannot add y in both xt and yt, because y is adjacent to x, which is in yt, and y is adjacent to z2, which is in xt. So y cannot be added for sure, right? What about yz3? Yz3 can increase. How can it increase? Add z3 will not increase, right? If you add z3, you are adding it to both, right? Because both the chains are moving identically. Adding z3 will not increase the symmetric difference. The only way to increase the symmetric difference is that you add it to one set but not to the other set. And that will not happen. Right? So once again, the only possibility here is when you try to add. So once again, you cannot add y, right? You can add Z3, but then that is okay. If you add Z3, then it will be added to both, right? So again, the symmetric difference will not change. Okay. So if you are in either of these two scenarios, so similar thing is what will happen when you have all three neighbors to be in the independent set. So if one of these things happens, then definitely dt plus 1 is not going to increase. It's going to remain. It's either going to be equal to dt or it will become dt minus 1. It will decrease. That's the only way. Right? It cannot increase. Any questions here?
Sir, this whole analysis we can repeat if like y has any number of neighbors, right? As long as it has two neighbors, at least two neighbors in the independent set.
This part you will probably be able to do it. Yes, I think so. This part, if it is more than 2, I think you'll be able to do it. Yes.
Okay, sir.
So let's look at this case here, right, where y has no neighbors. Right? This is the second scenario where you have x, and then you have y and z1, z2, z3, where none of them are actually in the independent set. Now what can happen? Let's start with this edge here. Okay. Suppose you're going to consider this edge y z1. What can happen?
Difference can decrease, right?
How will it decrease?
If you add y and remove z1.
If you add y and remove z1, will it decrease or will it increase?
Xt does not have x.
Xt does not have x, yes, but yt has x.
Right. So if you add y and remove z1 in xt, y will be added, but in yt, y won't be added.
Yeah. So which means the symmetric difference is increasing.
Okay.
Right. So the symmetric difference is increased here.
Right. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. So if you try to remove z1 and add y, the symmetric difference will increase. Will it increase in any other case? It will not, right? Because z1 is you might either so if you're not going to add y, then z1 either whether you add or not, you'll be able to do it for both. Will it? Yeah.
Sir, can it also not be the case that z1 is also a neighbor of x?
Z1 is also a neighbor of x, in which case also it can. So let me just see if z1 is a neighbor of x. Yeah. Let me just. If z1 is a neighbor of x, then sure. Sure, that is also possible. Let me just think. Yeah. Sure. If z1 is a neighbor of x, what will happen?
Then that other case also there's a chance that it will increase, right? Like
so if you're removing both, for instance, then it will not change anything. If you're removing y and z1, it will not change anything.
Right.
So now the question is whether you try to add z1 and remove y.
Right.
Right. So then okay, so you're saying that it is possible that no, so y has no neighbors in I, right? So these are not in I. So you were saying that you could add them. So what happens if this occurs? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Now, if you remove y and add z1 again, the symmetric difference will increase. Right?
If you remove y and add z1, yes, that is also possible. Okay. Here we can. Okay. Uh, yes, that is also possible. Okay, so that will. Oh, so let me just think whether.
Sir, also like the same thing is possible in the previous scenario. Right?
Which scenario? Let me just see.
In scenario one,
Ha.
like you consider y z3,
Yeah.
but now z3 is also neighbor of x.
Okay.
And now if you remove y and add z3,
Uh,
in xt case it can be added, but in the yt case, because x is a neighbor of z3, you cannot add it. Right?
uh, okay. Let me just. Okay. So you're looking at this case here. If there is an edge like this.
Right.
So in this case, hmm, yeah, that is true. So it is possible. So you want to remove y and add z3.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I see. So let me just think. I think there is some issue in what I just said. Let me just think. Okay, so the idea is that so we look at the cases where these so that will basically be covered, I think, in the case when so we are going to look at each neighbor of x one at a time. Okay, and the case where if x is neighbor to z3, that will be covered in the case that will come next. Right? For instance, what are we trying to do? We are trying to do the following. Okay, so let me just try to go back here. Right? So what we want to say is that each time this value dt plus 1 is going to increase, there is a corresponding other vertex, other move, because of which it will decrease. That's what we want to show. Okay, so that in effect it's always going to decrease. Either it will decrease, or whenever there is a place where it is increasing, there is also a subsequent possibility that you can take where it will reduce. Okay, that's what we want to prove. Okay, so then we will look at the case separately. So let's assume that y is a neighbor of x and z1, z2, z3 are not neighbors of x. Okay, these are adjacent to y, but they need not be adjacent to x. Okay, because the case when that is adjacent to x, that will be covered in a similar analysis when you take that corresponding edge and the neighbors. Okay, let's assume that these are all not neighbors of, right? So we can assume that there are no these are not neighbors of x, right? Otherwise you will have otherwise you look at the case where y has just one vertex or one neighbor or something. Okay, I think that will work.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. So then, so in this case, therefore, this is one place where it will change. Similarly, the same analysis applies to each of these edges, right? It is true for each of these edges. The same analysis will work, and each of them will possibly increase the value by 1. Okay. So what is the probability that the value will increase by 1? There are 3 possible choices of edges. For each of them, so at most, right, what the probability that this value will increase by 1 is at most there are 3 possible choices, and with probability that you will make the step is something like 1 over 3, right, 1 over 3 times e, right, because you want to choose that particular edge, and with probability 1 over 3 you will make that particular move, and there are 3 possible edges which can do this, right? So this probability is at most 1 over e, that this is the probability for dt plus 1 being increasing, correct? Now what I want to say is that there are corresponding moves which will also make dt plus 1 decrease, so that in effect, when you do the expectation and you look at the expectation sum, in effect the sum is going to go to 0. Okay, so what are the moves that will decrease the value of dt? What are the choices that will decrease the value of dt?
You can choose XY and remove both.
You can choose xy and remove both, right? That will decrease the value of dt. Anything else?
You can choose XY, add Y, and remove X.
Yeah, that also will work. Um,
And yeah, you
Rem-
can choose XY and remove Y and add X.
yeah, basically, if you choose the edge xy, no matter what you do, you will end up decreasing the value of dt plus 1, right? So if you choose xy, then every transition reduces dt plus 1 by 1, right? Correct. So it doesn't really matter. So this is what will be taken care of, right? So if you had that xz3 is in, if xz3 was an edge, you don't need to consider. You will be looking at only z1, z2, and xz3 will anyway decrease that value, right? So that's why the case basically z1, z2, z3 are all not going to be adjacent to x. It will be covered in this case. So what it's basically saying is that if you look at that entire sum, which is the summation expectation of delta w dt is equal to 1, you look at the case where the edges in the scenario where the edge weights are increasing, then there are corresponding sums where it will reduce, right, where the values will be minus 1, because of which it will cancel off. So here this probability, right, this probability is basically uh, 1 over e again, right? With 1 over e it will reduce by 1. Basically delta x would become minus 1, right? That's what this is telling. Is that clear? Okay, so whatever happens there, it will happen here also. So the final scenario is this, where you have just exactly one vertex which is a neighbor of one vertex in I. What will happen now? What will cause dt to increase? What will cause dt to decrease?
I can choose y z1 and remove z1, add y.
Remove z1, add y.
That will cause the symmetric difference to increase.
That will cause symmetric difference to increase by how much?
By 1, I think. Oh, by 1 or 2.
So okay, so you're removing z1, right? And you are adding y, right? So it will increase by 2, right? The reason is that adding y and removing z1 step will happen only in xt, right? So if you choose the edge y z1, so adding y and removing z1 can be done only in the chain xt, right? So what will happen in xt is that xt plus 1 will become xt minus z1 union y, whereas yt plus 1 will be same as yt, right? So the symmetric difference will increase by 2, right? Because yt contains z1, right, which has been removed from xt, and y is not present in yt, right? And x is present in yt, right? So the symmetric difference will increase by 2 if you use the edge y z1, right? Anything? What else can happen? Is can any other change increase the symmetric difference? For instance, if you take y z2, it cannot do anything, right? Because you cannot add y in both xt or yt, because y is adjacent to both a vertex in xt and an adjacent vertex in yt. Similarly, you cannot add y. Similarly, when you consider y z3, so this is the only place in which you will actually increase. Yeah, others will decrease or keep the same, right? This is the only place where it will happen. So this the probability of increasing by 2. So the expected increase would be something like at most 2 times 1 over 3 times cardinality, right? So this is 2 over 3 cardinality, right? This is at most so much. Okay. Now you need to say that you can also decrease it, right? How will you, when will it decrease?
If you choose xy and you remove both, or you
Yeah. So if you
remove
choose,
y and add x.
yeah, right. So if you choose that edge and you choose to remove both, then it will decrease. Or you choose to remove y and add x, in which case it will decrease, because both of them will become the same. Similarly, if you what happens if you try to remove x and add y?
It will remain same because in both cases it will fail.
So that will actually work, right? Removing x and adding y will work in yt, but it will not work in xt.
Okay.
No, sorry, just a minute.
You cannot add y in both cases, right?
Yeah, you cannot add y in both cases. You are right, because z1 lies in I, because therefore it is there in both xt and yt, and therefore you cannot add y. So that move also will not happen. Exactly. Right? So there are two possible moves that you can do. Two of the out of the three moves, you will reduce the value. So if you choose the edge xy, then this reduces the probability, the value it reduced by at least something like 2/3, right? Because there are two possible moves, each with the 1/3, right? So what it means is that in all the cases, right, whenever there is a move that is increasing the value of dt plus 1, there is a corresponding move that is also decreasing it, right? So what it means that if you take that expectation sum, then in effect it is not the expectation. Whenever there is a term which is adding some value into that expectation, then you can take the corresponding edge which will decrease that value for you, right? So in effect, the expected value is not going to increase, right? In other words, the expected value of dt plus 1 minus dt given dt is equal to 1 will be less than or equal to 0, right? It can only be smaller, it cannot increase. Right? Whenever there is a term which is increasing, there's a corresponding term that will decrease. Then there are other terms that it might decrease. Right? When you looked at scenario 1, there are cases where it will actually reduce. Right? So therefore, this expected value is at most 0. Right? Which basically what it will mean is that expected value of dt plus 1 given dt is equal to 1 is at most dt, right? It is always reducing, right? So this is the analysis for just coupling when you have two states that differ by one vertex. Okay. So now we actually go into path coupling. We actually look at arbitrary states xt and yt, and we see what can we say about how they differ. Okay. So to do that, what you do is you look at a sequence of states starting from z0, which is equal to xt, z1, z2, up till it will go till dt, right? Because the symmetric difference between xt and yt is dt. So you go till z dt, which is equal to yt. Okay? And the condition is that any two consecutive states will differ in exactly one vertex. Right? So zi minus 1 plus cardinality zi minus 1 minus zi is equal to 1. Every two consecutive states will differ in one vertex. Okay. And this you can always construct such a sequence, right? What you do is, for instance, is you look at the sequence where you keep removing vertices in xt one at a time until you have removed all the vertices in xt minus yt, and then you keep adding vertices from yt minus xt one at a time until you reach yt. Okay? So the sequence you can always construct, right? There's a very canonical way in which you can write the sequence of sets. Okay, such that for every consecutive pair of independent sets, they differ in exactly one vertex. Okay, is that okay? Right, so this is the path in which, so we are going to define the coupling between xt and yt, and we are going to use the fact that for every consecutive states, we can actually have a bound on the way in which it varies. And we can use that to bound the variation between xt and yt as the Markov chain progresses. Okay. Now, the coupling is obtained as follows. What you do is, for a move in xt, you make the corresponding move in z1. That will give you a corresponding move in z2. That will give you a corresponding move in z3, and so on till the corresponding move in zt, which is the move that you want to do in yt. Okay. In our case, it's actually very simple, right? Because z1, the move in two consecutive states are exactly the same, right? So finally, the move in xt and yt are going to be exactly the same move. Okay. But just that path coupling is a more general technique. So it is possible that when you apply it, you can have a more complicated coupling between consecutive states, so that you will not be able to explicitly say what is the coupling between xt and yt, but you just say that it is obtained by combining the couplings between consecutive pairs states. In our case, you don't need to say it that way because it's the same changes, right? The change in xt and change in z1 will be the same. The change in z1 and z2, whatever you do in z1, you'll do in z2. Whatever you do in z2, you'll do in z3, and so on. So whatever you do in xt, you will do in yt also. But in general, it need not be the case. Right? So this technique is much more general than just this problem. So in which case, it is possible that this is the coupling might be much more complicated to explain, explicitly explain. Right? But in our case, it's the same move. Okay. So this defines this coupling, and we want to analyze this coupling now. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's try to bound this the change in the difference, right, between the two sets. Okay. So let's look at one step of the transition, right? So xt goes to xt plus 1. Call that set as z0 prime. Right? So there is z1 prime, z2 prime, z dt prime, which is equal to yt plus 1. Right? There is one step. We know how to we know something how to analyze these two consecutive states, right? That's what we have done, right? In particular, what we are interested in is this quantity delta zi minus 1 prime comma zi prime, right? The difference between the symmetric difference between zi and zi minus 1 and zi, right? Zi minus 1 prime and zi prime. What can we say about the expected value of this symmetric difference? What can you say about this value? What does the analysis tell you? This is not less than or equal to 0. So this, so in the analysis, what we had was this minus the symmetric difference between zi minus 1 and zi. Right? So zi itself is a set. So this quantity, so in the previous thing, what we actually looked at was delta zi minus 1 prime zi minus delta zi minus 1 zi. Right? This was dt plus 1. This is what exactly was dt plus 1, and this was dt. Okay. So what you can say is that this is, oh, sorry. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. So what you can say is that this quantity must be at most 1. This is at most because zi and zi minus 1 are differing in exactly one vertex. So this is at most delta zi minus 1 zi. Right? So this quantity can be at most 1. That is what we just proved in the previous analysis. Right? Because of the fact that these sequence of states differ in exactly one vertex. Their symmetric difference is exactly 1. Right? So you can apply the same analysis from there to say that the expected value of this delta value, this is at most 1. Right? Is that okay? Any questions? Okay. So then what you do is you actually want this dt plus 1, right? Which is xt plus 1 minus yt plus 1 plus yt plus 1, cardinality yt plus 1 minus xt plus 1. What you do is you just use, this is basically writing some sort of a telescopic sum. And then using the, right, then using triangle inequality. Right? You write xt plus 1 is what you want, which is zi prime. You write this huge sequence where you write this as z0 prime minus z1 prime plus z1 prime minus z2 prime, right? And so on till z dt minus 1 prime minus y t plus 1, right? And then you split it. This is at most these values. And here you go, and this is basically delta z0 prime, z1 prime. right? So you can write this as the sum of these delta values, right? So therefore, if you do this, what you actually get is that expected value of dt plus 1 given dt is at most dt. Okay, this value is at most dt. The only problem with this proof right now is that if you recall the other proof that we did earlier, what we had was there was a small alpha sitting in here, right? Which is the one that was it was dt multiplied by an alpha. This is the one that was actually shrinking the sizes, right? So that finally you will have a situation so that you can say something like the expected value of dt plus 1 is less than or equal to something, and then use a Markov. That's how we did it in the previous step. Unfortunately, here that alpha is missing, right? How large can dt be? Is there a bound here in this case? How large can dt be? Like asymptotically, how large can it be as a function of n? So if you recall, if you try to do this, you will go until d0 or something, right? So how large can that be? Right? It could go till theta n, right? You could have an empty independent set and you can have a very large independent set. Right? So what we have seems like slightly weaker than what we want, right? If you just use that, if you try to do that, then we don't seem to be getting anywhere, right? It might just go off, right? I mean, it might just that'll be that's not very useful here. But it turns out that this is sufficient to prove the bound, which is left as an exercise in the book, and I think I'll give some hints and give it as a problem in the problem set. You can show that this is sufficient to actually bound the probability that dt plus 1 is this is what you want. What is the probability? How do you bound the probability that dt plus 1 is greater than 1? You want to say this is small, this is less than epsilon for t, which is polynomial in n and 1 over epsilon. Okay, and this condition is sufficient to do it. And that is a small exercise that I will leave it for now. I'll give it as a problem in the problem set and give you some hints about how to go about doing it. Yeah, it is an exercise in the book also. You can try to do it. I'll give it as a problem in the final problem set as well. Okay. So this is the idea of the path coupling, right? Because you're able to analyze this quantity. Okay. And it's not necessary that the two states should differ in exactly one vertex or something. It will depend on the problem. It is possible that it will differ in more than one, but a small number of vertices. So that the case analysis that you want to do here to bound this is much more simple than looking at two sets that are very huge and that differ in very many different vertices, right? Or many different elements. Okay. So the idea of path coupling is to look at this very large set which might differ in many points by looking at it in a very sort of as small changes which go from one set to the other. It's present in many different proofs in many places. So the idea of splitting a very large sequence as a bunch of small analyzing this very large set by splitting it as a sequence of small sets so that the small sets are easy to analyze is something that is common. It is a technique that is there and used in many different places, and this uses it here in for proving this bound on the mixing times. Okay, so I think I'll stop now. Okay, so this is one technique to prove a bound on the mixing time. What we'll do next is we'll briefly look at the chain for matching. Yeah, and then we'll see, we'll probably not have time to go over that entire thing, but we'll see other techniques to prove bounds on the mixing time. Okay, we'll briefly go over it. So next week, Thursday is a holiday because of Diwali, so there is only a lecture on Monday and Wednesday. And then after that we have the final week, and final week we'll set aside for the presentations. So we just have 2 more lectures. We'll cover some part of that of matchings, right? The bounding, the mixing times of matching. It uses slightly different techniques than coupling. Okay, so we'll briefly go over that. because I don't have any time to start anything new, right? Because 2 lectures, it's probably I'll not be able to cover anything in detail, and I'll have to leave it halfway. So we'll just go over the mixing times for that Metropolis chain for matchings. Okay. Any questions so far regarding today's lecture? Yeah. Okay. So then that's all for now.